Clearing the train unlocks Occupy Factory and Rescue Kolbor in that order. But Triple Rod Saber is the perfect loadout for Stop the Hacking, so that's where we're going next. Start of this stage is pretty much identical to Find Hidden Base. We don't have the Buster for this guy, so we hit it with a extended jump slash instead. And we don't have to kill that thing at the top of this place. Ideally, you want to jump into this pit as far to the right side as possible. Exactly why I'll get into in a little bit. But if you're more like in the center, it might be worth moving to the right a tiny bit, as long as you don't hit the wall. Just because if you do hit the wall, you'll lose all your vertical momentum. This is another stage where RNG manipulation doesn't matter, incidentally, so don't worry about that. Later in the stage there's a big lake with a few submarines floating in it, and the water level oscillates up and down on a fixed cycle. Sometime while you're falling through this tunnel, I think it's around halfway, like here or so, that water loads and its cycle begins. The reason we want to be on the right side is that it will actually load a few frames later than if we were on the left side. I think the difference is as big as around like 8 frames or so from when you're on the far left versus the far right, which isn't huge, but that actually makes a notable difference when going for the early subskip. We take anything we can get for that. Because the cycle's loaded at this point, any time loss that we incur is going to make it that much harder to get the early subskip. Our first obstacle is some dialogue by Seal. Because the game is still running while you're going through that dialogue, you will have a harder time on English to get the early subskip. It should still be possible, but you won't have quite as much leeway. And then we just fall through here in the same way as Find Hidden Base. Here is where things get tough. So I'll go through it really slowly. So we land over here. For this guy there's 2 approaches. You can either jump into like the corner between him and that little stalactite and take a damage boost forward. It's easier to do that, at least for this specific location, but it will cost you some time, which, apart from just being a regular time loss, also means getting the early subskip later is going to be much more difficult. The optimal approach is to hit him with a jump slash, and then during the hit lag, you attack again to start a spin. So you'll see I actually approach it with an extended jump slash, and then during the hit lag press the attack button again and you start a spin, and that'll kill it before you hit it. Like I said, a bit trickier than going for the damage boost, but it pays off later and then makes the subskip easier. Now this jump's not too bad. You've got a lot of room to land on this stalactite. This one though is quite challenging. You have to jump from a very specific spot on here in order to land in a good location on the next stalactite. I recommend doing a full length jump, just so it's the same every time and you only have to worry about the variable of where you jump from. So I go from like halfway on that slanted surface personally. That's around the visual cue I look for. And you'll just barely get past this bomb and still have a few pixels to land on this thing. Your timing off of this needs to be very precise as well, or else you'll just walk off the stalactite. And then you can just kill this guy with some jump slashes. These jumps aren't bad at all. Just dash off that ledge, don't jump. You'll land around here. I use that vertical bar in the background as a visual cue, like a little bit before zero gets to it is around when I'm hitting the ground. Exactly where you land will actually vary based on how high the water is when you go into it. So it's a very minor difference, but keep it in mind if you're going like especially slow one run. If you just like dash off and expect everything to be the same, you might go right into that spike pit over there. And then you just skip past the fish, nothing to worry about there. Now, here we have to worry about the pogoing. This is the first time in the run that we use pogoing, so let me explain a little bit. Basically, to aim the triple rod directly down while you're in the air, you need to only be holding directional down on the D-pad. You can't be holding down forward. It's actually really dangerous when you're going for this to hold down forward. I'll show why in a bit, not right away. So what that means is you need to stop moving horizontally in order to do the downward triple rod attack. In order to have optimal movement, then the key is to release left for the shortest possible amount of time while you press the attack button, and then repress left. So let's get the inputs on screen again. And we want to dash like as far to the edge on this ledge as possible before we jump off it. The further forward the better. Full hop, you'll hit your head on the sub, and then you want to start the pogo far away from that squid that we're going to bounce off of. So I'm holding just down, attack, back to forward. That was pretty sloppy, honestly. I spent a lot of frames holding just down, but it's not super precise as long as you've done everything at full speed up to this point. By starting the pogo far away from the squid, it means we'll be relatively high up when we bounce off of them. If you start the pogo later, the hitbox of your attack will appear partway through the squid already, so you can be further down before it connects. And that'll affect exactly where you bounce to. So for this setup, we want to start the pogo far away from the squid. And to keep it going, you only need to hold directional down. You don't need to continue holding the attack button. Though I normally do for a while, just because I'm more focused on other stuff than releasing it. So you don't do anything else, you just hold left and down and jump. By the way, you need to be holding jump when you bounce off them, or else you won't get a full height bounce. So just hold left, down, and jump. If you're still holding the attack button like I am, not a big deal, but you'll have to get rid of it at some point. I normally do it, release the attack button that is, while I'm bouncing off this guy, but whatever works for you. Just make sure you don't release the attack button in a situation where you could actually do another attack, because then you might actually do an attack, because you'll have a charge held. So if done correctly, that'll fit you right into this gap. And you can just dash along here. You want to fall a specific distance before you wall jump here, otherwise you will hit your head on the sub after bouncing off this wall. I use this little indent in the wall as a cue. So jump there. You don't want to do a full height jump here, ideally. Just because if you do, it'll take you longer before you fall on top of this fish. And again, we want to start our pogo ahead of time. That way we bounce from relatively high up. And as soon as you hit him, start holding right. Continue to hold jump so you get the full bounce. And we're there. Let's watch at full speed. Let's say your pogos are off a little bit and see what happens. So I jumped a bit far on the right side. I didn't dash along that ledge as long as I should have. And then if I hit this one too far to the right side, it's going to cause problems. Basically, I go up too high and hit my head before I make it into the gap, and it basically prevents me from fitting in. If you react to it quick enough, you can do a quick wall jump here and get underneath it. It's very dangerous. You have a very substantial risk of being crushed by the sub. It's only an option if everything's gone perfect up to that point and you're on Japanese. I would never try it in any other circumstance. And then everything else is the same, except you're going to have a really tough time getting that last bounce. You'll see, like, it doesn't even look like I should make it, but I just barely get pushed up. So if you've made any mistakes up to this point, from the point where the sub's loaded to here, they will be lower on their cycle. That has a couple implications. For one thing, it will affect your bounces off here. So you won't go as high because it'll get blocked by the sub, and that can affect other stuff. The other thing is that you risk getting crushed when you go through here if the sub is pretty low. Basically what it comes down to is if you make any mistake at all on the way here that costs like a noticeable amount of time, you're not going to be able to go for the early sub skip. You should just wait for the cycle to pass and go for the regular sub skip, which I'll explain later in the video. Alright, let's consider if you take the damage boost off of the shell guy. So you'll just jump on top of him. Since you've got iframes, you can go right through this bomb. Won't last for the other one though. Still gotta dodge that. And then everything's the same for a while. Now at this point the subs are quite a bit lower than they would be otherwise, which makes the pogos more difficult and more dangerous. Again, we want to be as far forward as we can on that ledge before we jump off. We'll hit our head earlier, so we start falling further to the right. And you want to hit like the right side of the squid. The lower the better, within reason. Otherwise you won't make it far enough horizontally. If done right, you'll just barely catch this squid on the right side with the triple rod. And you'll just barely fit through here. And then you have to start your dash pretty quick or else you'll get crushed. This pogo is also a little bit more precise. We set it up in exactly the same way, but you don't have as much leeway since now the subs are higher in their cycle than they were with the other method. So, because it makes the pogos so much more difficult, I would honestly say that overall killing the shell enemy is probably easier than taking the damage boost off of him. Knowing how to do the sub-skip like this, though, could be pretty handy as a backup. Allow me to demonstrate. So, let's say we kill the shell guy, but then we jump too early here, and we get boosted forward by that bomb. This is basically identical to if we had gone for the damage boost off the shell. In fact, it should even be like a frame or two faster. So you can then approach the sub-skip in exactly the same way as if you had gone for the damage boost. So you hit this guy on the right side, this one as well, and you can fit through. If you are an astute viewer, you'll notice I was even, like I said, a few frames faster. Though, that could have just been from general movement improvements. It can make a big difference if you're moving really smooth or not in this section. Having the sub just a few frames higher or lower on the cycle can really affect how difficult it is to get the pogos. By the way, because of the extra time spent getting through the text, on English, you do not have the luxury of going for that kind of backup, or for going for the damage boost on the shell. You have to kill the shell enemy and do everything else right. Any mistake, and it's over. You'll have to go for a regular sub-skip, which I'll demonstrate how to do now. So if you've messed up some stuff, and you know you're not going to be getting the early sub-skip, here's what you do. You can wait for it either there or over here. I normally wait on the first section. Depending on how slow you are, you might not even be able to make it through here. So, use your best judgment. Get that guy out of the way, jump across. Now, it's way too high to jump up onto it right now. We need to wait. So, how I do it is I stand on the left side of this ledge, and as the sub's getting to around here, where it crosses that horizontal line in the background, that's around when I go onto this wall, and I start sliding down it instead of just dropping next to it. But I use the same cue, like that indent on the wall here. So wait for the sub to fall, slide down to there, and then bounce up. I mentioned earlier in the video that holding down and left instead of just down when you do the triple rod attack is very dangerous. Allow me to show why. If you kill that guy without bouncing off of it, you're just kind of left in the middle with a big spike pit underneath you. If you react to it fast enough, you can move to the right and damage boost off that squid to save yourself, but in my experience, almost always this will cause immediate death. So be sure to practice your pogo skills before you go for this. You get on top of the sub one way or another, then what? If you've done the early sub skip, the locations where it fires torpedoes from will be consistent. You'll always get 2 out of there that we can take out with a jump slash. By the way, navigating the sub's kind of tricky. So you can get on top of that little ledge with a single wall jump here. If you're high enough up when you do that wall kick and you do a full jump, and then you can just do a tiny hop onto this section and then dash off. And then you'll have torpedoes launching from the top over here. With a really tiny hop, you can just barely fit in beside them. If you're not confident in that, or you need more saber experience, you can take them out with an extended jump slash as you go through. If you didn't do the early sub skip, then you're going to have torpedoes coming from different spots generally. Exactly where will vary based on how exactly you messed up. So you'll just have to get used to the different possibilities. Generally, taking a hit's not a huge deal, since we don't need any intentional damage boosts on the boss of the stage, but those torpedoes do a lot. So if you took a fair amount of damage while messing up early subskip, you might want to be a bit cautious about also getting hit by a torpedo. You want to do a wall jump off of here to get up into this gap. And then these Pantheons are in the way. You only need to kill one, and then you can jump over the other onto the ladder. This Pantheon varies in whether or not he's walking to the right or the left when you get up here. If he's going to the right, you can just kill him with a jump and a spin slash as you reach him. If he's going to the left, then after you land, you have to do like a short hop to the left, kill him, and then jump over the other. I don't know exactly what affects it, but both are fine. Then you can just jump over that guy. For these computers, we're just going to spin back and forth with extended jump slashes. After the first and the last computers you destroy, you'll trigger some dialogue. If you accidentally leave one behind, if it's on the first floor like this, you need to go back for it. Because if you move it too far out of the screen, like when you go up for these ones, it will have regenerated its health if you leave it alive. So don't leave it with 1 hit point and expect to come back for it later. If you leave one of those on the second floor, that's fine. Just clear the ones up here and then drop down and finish it off. Though generally you definitely want to be finishing them off before you move up. Now we just need to navigate backwards through the stage a little bit. It's just barely possible to jump between that guy and the corner. It's kind of tricky since you can't see what you're doing, but it's not too bad. And then for these guys, you can just jump over them on this side. Ideally, you won't catch that corner at all, but a lot of times you will. And then we want to equip the shield for fighting Leviathan. Careful you don't mistime your jump when you land here and go right into those spikes. Leviathan's a little bit tricky, but not too tough of a fight. At the start, we want to land right on this little ledge before hitting her, and then dash underneath. You don't want to go too far past her. It can mess up the rest of the fight. So you just go a bit past, turn around, and then start attacking. Get as many hits in as you can. Normally, a good first set of attacks will get her 3 hits into the green health bar. I believe it's possible to get 4 hits in with really good rhythm. And then you just wait a bit. Once she starts coming down, you turn around, attack her some more, and before she throws those icicles into you, you start running underneath her. Then you just get all the way on the right side of the wall, turn around, and end the fight. 101's the best I've gotten on this stage. That's really rare though. I think I only ever got it once in an IL. So 102 would be pretty solid. If you don't get the early sub skip, basically add 10 seconds to the time. Like maybe a little bit less than 10. Like 111's pretty good with regular sub skip.